Most Australians drink coffee every single day. It is one of the most consistent rituals in modern life. Morning after morning, the same cup, the same brand, the same quiet assumption that what is in the bag is what it says on the label. But coffee is one of the most blended, most substituted, most quietly altered food products on the shelf today. And the gap between what the packaging suggests and what is actually inside has grown wider every decade. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, in ways that rarely get discussed. Because this isn't just about taste. It connects to how the entire global coffee supply chain shifted over the past 40 years. Who profits? Who pays? What gets added? What gets removed? And what the word coffee now legally permits that most people would never expect. And once you see how the system works, the whole picture, not just a bag on your shelf, you cannot look at the coffee aisle the same way again. This is where the real story begins. Walk into any supermarket in Australia, and the coffee aisle looks like abundance. Dozens of brands, dozens of roasts, single origin, blended, dark, medium, light, organic certified, Rainforest Alliance, fair trade, mountain grown, small batch, artisan roasted. The language is confident. The imagery is warm. Weathered hands, sunrise over hills, stone villages somewhere in Colombia or Ethiopia. Most people pick their brand once, find something that tastes acceptable, and stay with it for years. It becomes routine. It becomes familiar. It becomes a thing they reach for without thinking. And that is precisely the condition that industrial food producers rely on, because routine purchases do not get scrutinized. Familiar products do not get questioned. And labels that have been designed to evoke craft, care, and origin are rarely checked against what is actually happening inside the supply chain. Here is what most people believe when they buy a named coffee brand. They believe the origin claim on the front means most of the coffee came from that place. They believe the certification logo means the product met a meaningful standard. They believe the roast description reflects a genuine process, rather than a flavor profile manufactured through additives and temperature manipulation. In most cases, at least one of those beliefs is not fully accurate. Coffee is one of the most loosely regulated food products in Australia when it comes to origin and blend disclosure. Under Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, FSANZ, there is no mandatory requirement for a coffee product to specify what percentage of the blend came from any particular country. A product labeled Colombian blend can contain Colombian coffee as a minority component. There is no defined floor. That word blend is doing enormous work. It means the manufacturer can combine beans from multiple origins, including cheaper commodity-grade beans from Vietnam, Uganda, or Brazil's lower-grade regions, with a smaller volume of the named origin bean, and legally present the whole product as associated with that origin. This is not fraud in the legal sense. It is permitted under current labeling rules. But it is a significant gap between what the packaging implies and what the product contains. Here is the part that is rarely discussed. Robusta beans, grown primarily in Vietnam and part of Africa, are significantly cheaper than Arabica beans, which dominate the premium end of the market. Robusta has roughly twice the caffeine content, but a considerably harsher flavor profile. It also has a higher concentration of chlorogenic acids, which a 2019 paper published in the journal Nutrients associated with digestive sensitivity in people who already find coffee difficult to tolerate. Most commercial blends contain Robusta that is not prominently communicated. Some contain it in quantities that would surprise a shopper who chose a product based on a smooth or mild descriptor on the front. This is the first layer of a system that rewards obscurity over transparency. Before the 1980s, the Australian coffee market looked very different. Specialty roasters were small, local businesses. The Italian-Australian community had built a genuine espresso culture in Melbourne and Sydney tied to specific origins and a direct relationship between roaster and product. Then two things happened simultaneously. Supermarkets began competing aggressively on shelf price, and the global commodity coffee market, driven by the International Coffee Agreement breaking down in 1989, flooded supply with cheap beans from new producers. The result was a race to the bottom on input costs. Large manufacturers learned that consumers chose primarily by brand recognition and price, not bean quality. The bag's job was to create an impression of quality. The content's job was to meet a minimum threshold at the lowest possible cost. This is not a conspiracy. It is a structural outcome of how industrial food production works under price pressure. What it means in practice is that the brand you recognize is often disconnected from the agricultural product inside it. The brand is managed by a marketing team. The sourcing is managed by a procurement team optimizing for cost. And the certification logos, Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, UTZ, while genuinely meaningful in some cases, have faced sustained criticism for allowing certified and uncertified beans to move through the same supply chains in ways that dilute the original standard. A 2021 report by the Business and Human Rights Resource Center found documented labor violations within cooperatives holding active certifications. The certification covers the process as recorded, not every transaction in the chain. This is still being studied, but it is worth understanding before you pay a premium for the logo. So let's look at what this actually means on the shelf. These are 9 brands currently available in Australian supermarkets that, for specific and verifiable reasons, deserve more scrutiny than their packaging invites. Number 9, Moccona Classic. Moccona is one of the most recognized instant coffee brands in Australia. The name suggests European heritage. The dark glass jar suggests quality. Moccona is owned by J.D. Peet's, Jacobs do Egberts, a Dutch conglomerate that is the second largest coffee company in the world by revenue. It sources from industrial-scale supply chains across dozens of countries. The Classic range is a Robusta-dominant blend that is not prominently communicated. The freeze-dried process used in instant coffee preserves caffeine but destroys the volatile aromatic compounds responsible for flavor complexity. What you are tasting is a standardized flavor profile manufactured through blending ratios, not through bean quality. J.D. Peet's was named in a 2022 report by Oxfam Australia as one of several multinational coffee companies whose supply chains included farms where workers were paid below a living wage. The company acknowledged the finding and stated it was working toward living wage commitments. As of 2024, that commitment remains defined as a target rather than a verified outcome. You are paying for a jar, not for the coffee it suggests. Number 8, Nescafé Gold. Nescafé is Nestlé, and Nestlé's relationship with its supply chains is one of the most documented and debated subjects in the ethical sourcing space. In 2021, Nestlé published its own assessment acknowledging that approximately 56% of its key ingredient supply chains did not yet meet its responsible sourcing standards. Coffee was among the categories flagged. Nescafé Gold is marketed as a premium instant product. The gold branding and the mountain imagery are doing the work of communicating quality that the bean sourcing does not fully support. The soluble coffee process, spray drying or freeze drying, involves temperatures that fundamentally alter the chemical structure of the bean. A 2020 paper in the Journal of Food Science and Technology documented that spray-dried coffee retains as little as 60% of the original chlorogenic acid content and loses a majority of the terpene compounds associated with coffee's more nuanced flavor notes. What you are drinking is a chemically reconstituted approximation of coffee. That is what soluble coffee is. For many purposes, that is fine. But the premium price of Nescafé Gold is not justified by the process it uses or the sourcing behind it. Number 7, International Roast. This one is more straightforward. International Roast is a budget end of the Nestlé Instant range. It contains a high proportion of Robusta beans and is spray-dried rather than freeze-dried, a cheaper, faster process that results in a harsher flavor profile and lower aromatic retention. The reason it is on this list is not the price. Budget products have a legitimate place. It is on this list because of what it is sold as. The word roast implies a roasting process tied to bean quality. The imagery on the tin implies warmth and tradition. What you are buying is commodity-grade soluble coffee at the lowest input cost the manufacturer can source. That gap between the implied story and the actual product is the issue at this price. With this transparency, the expectation being set is simply not honest. Number 6, Harris Coffee. Harris has been part of Australian coffee culture since 1883. The heritage is real. The current product is not the same company. Harris was acquired by Lavazza, the Italian coffee giant, in 2010. production, and sourcing moved into Lavazza's global supply chain. The Australian heritage on the packaging is now a brand asset owned by a multinational, not a reflection of how or where the coffee is produced. This is one of the clearest examples of heritage being used as marketing after the substance of that heritage has been removed. Harris still has Australian brand recognition. That recognition was built over a century of local operation. The company that benefits from that recognition today is headquartered in Turin. Additionally, several consumer reviews on Australian grocery platforms between 2022 and 2024 noted significant inconsistency in roast quality across batches of the same Harris product, a pattern consistent with large-scale blending operations where batch-to-batch variation is harder to control than in smaller roasteries. You are buying a name. That is a choice you can make knowingly. It is harder to make it knowingly when the packaging does not tell you. Number 5, Vittoria Coffee. This one will surprise some people. Vittoria has strong Italian-Australian brand equity. The brand has been part of the Australian market for decades and carries genuine cultural weight in communities that take coffee seriously. But here is the part that is usually overlooked. Vittoria is owned by the Canarella Brothers Group, still privately held, which is genuinely different from the multinationals above. That is worth acknowledging. However, Vittoria's mainstream supermarket range, the ground coffee in the yellow bags, is a commercial blend with no disclosed origin breakdown. The Arabica claim on some products is accurate, but Arabica is a species, not a quality designation. Arabica beans range from exceptional single-origin lots to low-grade commodity beans grown at altitude in Vietnam and Indonesia. The word Arabica on a commercial blend does not tell you where in that range the beans sit. Vittoria's premium and single-origin lines are a different product. Those are worth distinguishing. But the mainstream supermarket range is priced and positioned as if the brand heritage applies to the contents. For the everyday yellow bag, the contents are a commodity blend carrying a premium adjacent price. Number 4, Woolworths Select / Macro Coffee. Supermarket-owned brand coffee is the most honest version of what all commercial coffee is doing. It just does not bother with a heritage story. Woolworths Select and the Macro Organic range are sourced through Woolworths' private label procurement system. The organic certification on the Macro range is third-party verified. That part is accurate. But here is what the organic certification does not tell you. Certified organic coffee can still be Robusta dominant. It can still be spray-dried. It can still be a blend of 12 origins with no majority. The organic standard covers pesticide use and farming practices. It does not cover flavor, freshness, roasting quality, or origin transparency. The Macro Organic label implies a level of care about the product of the organic certification. On its own, does not guarantee. Shoppers choosing it for health or environmental reasons may be getting some of what they are paying for and not getting other parts of it. This is not unique to Woolworths. But the Macro branding specifically positions itself as a more considered choice. The transparency behind that positioning is not sufficient to justify the claim. Number 3, Coles 925 / Coles Finest Coffee. The same structural issue applies here, and it goes one level deeper. Coles Finest is positioned as a premium-owned brand option. The packaging is darker, more considered. Single origin language appears on some products in the range. What Coles does not publish is the sourcing detail behind these products. Which roaster produces them? Which farms or cooperatives supply the beans? What is the crop year the beans used? Coffee degrades. Green beans store for more than 12 to 18 months before roasting develop what the specialty coffee industry calls past crop characteristics, a papery, flat flavor, and reduced acidity. Large supermarket private label programs often source from commodity warehouses, where crop year is not a primary purchasing criterion. Fresh roasted, recently harvested coffee tastes measurably different from commodity store coffee. The Coles Finest price point implies a quality that the supply chain transparency does not support. When you cannot find out who roasted it, when it was roasted, or where the beans came from in any meaningful detail, that absence of information is itself informative. Number 2, Lavazza Qualita Rossa. Lavazza is one of the world's largest coffee companies. The Italian positioning is culturally powerful in Australia. The red and gold packaging has been in Australian kitchens for decades. Qualita Rosa is Lavazza's entry-level mainstream product. It is a blend of approximately 70% Robusta and 30% Arabica, by Lavazza's own historical product descriptions. That ratio is not prominently communicated on Australian packaging. A shopper choosing Qualita Rosa because they associate Lavazza with Italian coffee quality is largely buying that association. The product itself is Robusta-dominant commodity coffee. Lavazza has faced documented criticism from the European Coffee Federation's Sustainable Sourcing Working Group over gaps in its smallholder farmer payment practices in East African supply chains. The company has living wage roadmaps in place. As of the most recent public disclosure in 2024, these remain roadmaps rather than verified outcomes. And here is the part that matters most for everyday Australian shoppers. Qualita Rosa is consistently priced at a point that positions it above the supermarket-owned brand tier, implying a quality premium that the Robusta content and commodity sourcing do not deliver. You are paying for Italy, not for the coffee. Number 1, Moccona Indulgence / Continental Gold, private label variants. Number 1 belongs to a category rather than a single brand, and it is the one with the most direct confirmation of the practice being described. Several premium-positioned instant coffee products sold in Australian supermarkets, including certain private label indulgence and gold variants, have been identified through independent consumer testing as containing chicory extract as a filler component without prominent front-of-pack labeling. Chicory is a root. It has been used as a coffee extender for centuries, originally during wartime rationing periods when real coffee was scarce. It is legal. It is not harmful in normal quantities. Some people consume chicory intentionally for its prebiotic properties. But chicory in a coffee product that does not prominently disclose its presence is a substitution. You are not getting the coffee volume you are paying for. You're getting coffee plus a cheaper filler. In 2023, a consumer advocacy review conducted by a contributor to Choice magazine, Australia's leading independent product testing organization, flagged this practice in several premium-priced instant products and noted that the disclosure was technically present in the ingredients list but absent from any front-of-pack communication. That is the definition of permitted concealment. When a manufacturer knows that customers would not choose their product if the substitution were prominently communicated, and they communicate it only in the fine print, that is not transparency. It is the minimum required by law, deployed to preserve a sale. This practice, more than anything else in this list, illustrates what has happened to commercial coffee in Australia. The premium product tier now contains budget-grade fillers. The fine print says so. The front of the pack does not. This is not an argument that all coffee is bad or that the industry is irredeemable. It is an argument that the gap between what coffee packaging implies and what coffee products contain has grown wide enough to affect the choices of people who genuinely care about what they are drinking. And here is what separates the products worth buying from the ones just described. 3 things. First, origin transparency. The roaster can tell you which country, which region, which cooperative, and in some cases which farm the beans came from. Second, roast date disclosure. Fresh roasted coffee has a roast date on the bag. Commodity coffee does not. This one detail alone filters out a significant portion of the avoid list. Third, ownership clarity. Independent roasters with named founders and local operations are structurally different from marketing brands operated by global procurement teams. When those 3 things are present, you're buying coffee. When they are absent, you're mostly buying the idea of coffee. First, 7 Seeds, Melbourne. 7 Seeds has been independently owned since 2008. They publish the farm, processing method, crop year, and roast date on every bag. That level of disclosure is the standard everything else should be measured against. Available online and at independent retailers nationally. Second, Single O, Sydney. Operating since 2003. They pioneered direct trade sourcing in Australia, buying directly from farms, not commodity brokers, with published pricing showing the premium paid to producers. Full origin disclosure and roast dating on every retail bag. This is what traceability looks like when it is taken seriously. Third, Ona Coffee, Canberra. Multiple World Barista Championship titles. Their retail range reflects the same sourcing standard applied to their competition coffee. full origin disclosure, roast dating, publicly stated producer relationships, available nationally online. Fourth, Merlot Coffee, Brisbane, a more accessible option, available in some independent supermarkets and specialty grocers. Long-established Queensland roaster, independently owned, with regional sourcing relationships, not at the transparency level of the three above, but meaningfully better than the supermarket mainstream. Fifth, your local independent roaster. This is the most important entry on the list. Australia has one of the highest concentrations of specialty coffee roasters per capita in the world. Most cities and regional centers have at least one local roaster with full origin transparency, fresh roasting cycles, and direct access to the people behind the product. You can ask where the beans came from and get a real answer. The coffee was roasted within weeks, not months. Your money stays in your community rather than in a global procurement budget. Search for specialty coffee roasters in your area. Most have websites and online retail. This is not a premium experience reserved for enthusiasts. It is simply coffee bought closer to its source. One brand worth noting separately is Campos Coffee. Campos has strong specialty coffee credentials. Founded in Sydney in 2002, known for quality sourcing, respected within the industry. In 2015, Campos sold a majority stake to Westmill Foods, a UK-based food company. The brand has continued to operate with largely the same sourcing approach, and the specialty positioning has not obviously degraded, but the ownership structure changed. And for shoppers who are choosing Campos specifically because they believe they are supporting an independent Australian business, that context is worth knowing. The coffee may still be worth buying. The independence claim is no longer fully accurate. That distinction matters. Not to make you distrust the product, but to ensure the reason you choose it is based on what is actually true. This is not just about coffee. What happened here? The gradual decoupling of brand identity from product substance, certification language that implies more than it delivers, cheap inputs behind premium positioning. This is a pattern running through almost every processed food category in the Australian market. Three forces made it possible. Supermarket consolidation gave Woolworths and Coles enough market power to compress supplier margins to the point where ingredient substitution became structurally necessary to maintain profitability. Global commodity markets made it possible to source ingredients from anywhere in the world at any quality level while maintaining the same brand presentation. And labeling rules written in a simpler era did not keep pace with what manufacturers were now permitted to obscure. The result is a food system where the most important information, where did this come from, what is actually in it, who was paid fairly to produce it, is systematically absent from the thing most people use to make their decision, the front of the pack. This is not often discussed, not because it is hidden, but because it requires looking at the whole system rather than one product at a time. Once you start doing that, it changes how you see a great deal of what is on the shelf, not just the coffee. Because the same pattern appears in something Australians consume just as consistently as coffee. The labeling is just as confident. The origin claims are just as loosely defined. The gap between what the packaging implies and what is inside is just as wide, and in some cases wider. And when you see how that system works alongside what we covered today, the picture of what modern food production actually looks like becomes much clearer. That is the next one.